Ganesha Elephantis.
Good card, but the note says when you play that, I should play this one in attack mode.
No way!
The Moon Cancer class is a pretty exclusive club. I mean, for the longest time it was just defined as BB, but she decided to franchise the Bonzi Buddy brand. The result is our first, and to date only Moon Cancer with no summoning restrictions, Jinako. She's a 5-star Moon Cancer introduced with Lost Belt 4, and as a refresher, Moon Cancers have class advantage against Avengers. That's a rare property, and hypothetically, Jinako would be the only game in town for most players. Before you get too excited though, let's look at her kit. Skill 1 is Thriving Business. It gives your frontline a standard attack buff and up to 20% charge. It also gives each member 5 stars per turn for a total of 15, assuming you can keep them alive. 20% party charges have plenty of applications, and you should level this first to take full advantage of it. You can combo this with Jinako's other damage tool, Broken Tusk. It gives her a solid 30% attack. What's this? A taunt and damage reduction. That's weird for a damage dealer, but not unprecedented. What kind of stats are we working with? Oh, 9.1k attack. That's amazing. For a 3-star servant. At this point, it's pretty obvious that Jinako is not in fact a damage dealer. As of this recording, she has the lowest attack of all 5-star servants. It might be on the low end even for a 4-star. The good news though is that she's absurdly thick, boasting the highest health stat of all playable servants. Okay, so we've got a supportive tank kind of character. To enhance this role, Jinako has Vinayaka. It's a targeted invuln and NP gain buff with the drawback that it also seals their skills. This has an easy workaround of using your target's skills first. The much bigger drawback is that the NP gain is a single turn effect, which limits its usefulness for NP looping shenanigans. But at the very least, you can pair it with Broken Tusk to redirect enemy NPs and build charge defensively. What you're building up to is Ganesha Impact. It's an AoE arts attack that has preemptive defense reduction. It gives invulnerability to Jinako, and its overcharge effect is a base 2k heal for herself. Now you've seen Jinako's stats. Outside of hands, doors, or a filler first wave, you shouldn't count on this to kill much of anything. But what it does is soften up enemies for subsequent NPs on the same turn by your other allies. Its defensive utility seems a lot more enticing, but this has its own problems. Firstly, her base NP gain is not great, and with a hit count of 3, Ganesha Impact isn't gonna make itself easy to loop. Secondly, this heal and invuln are entirely selfish, meaning that it doesn't help keep anyone else alive. Kind of a problem considering how many Avengers have AoE Noble Phantasms. This arrangement leaves Jinako without much in the way of a clear application beyond enabling 0-star kaleidoscopes. She almost feels like a scuffed Jean. Maybe the idea was for her to fill the gap in Jean's coverage and manage Avengers, but the problem with this idea is that Avenger encounters are A, very rare, and B, they tend to involve one powerful enemy. Hitting multiple at the same time isn't all that necessary. The other AoE Moon Cancers have special tricks that make them useful in non-Avenger fights, but what exactly does Jinako bring to those? Her potato damage makes attacking a non-starter, and her defensive utility is undercut by the simple fact that the Moon Cancer class doesn't offer much in the way of coverage. One of the things that makes Jean so strong is that she's a ruler. She has defensive class advantage against 6 out of the 7 standard classes. Having that damage reduction makes her health pool and healing way more impactful than Jinako's raw stats. Now if a foreigner had Jinako's kit, that'd be a different story, but that tragically isn't the case. Now she does have generic utility in her first skill, and eating single target NPs is useful. You can run her as a generic support in the absence of better options. I'd say one of the attackers she plays nicer with is Kiritsugu, since he can extend her tanking run with his targeted taunt. He'd certainly appreciate the NP gain effect. If for whatever reason you need her to stick around in a fight, you can run her with Tamamo and Castoria. The former gives cooldown reduction and increases the time between enemy NPs, and the latter's NP is just stupidly good on a defensive level. I guess you can try to use Castoria to make Jinako loop too, but frankly I don't think that's a question worth answering. I do have one other suggestion. Once her skills are down, Jinako is a glorified paperweight, so if you want the utility of Thriving Business without the hassle of keeping her around, you could have Chen Gong send her on an all-expenses-paid trip to Brazil, if you catch my drift. He has a targeted taunt too, so you can even leverage 2 turns of tanking first. For craft essences, I'd focus on utility picks. Stars from 2030, Passive Charge from Prisma Cosmos, and Gura Gura Poster Girl to extend her defensive screening. If you absolutely need to attack, I'd go with Black Grail. She can charge a 0-star scope by herself, but I'd say the resulting wet noodle isn't worth the trouble. Finally, there's her Bond CE, which is sort of like a discount 2030 with a very mediocre party heal effect attached. Nothing game-breaking, but it actually does something. As for command codes, I personally wouldn't recommend putting them on Jinako. Better to save your keys if you ask me. but if you have to, use First Servant for damage reduction. Also healing in flat star income CEs if you really feel committed. Jinako is a very weird servant. She's thick. So thick in fact that she might thwart attempts to use her for esports. That aside, I think she's a pretty good example of extra class servants being overbalanced for no particular reason. Her abysmal attack stat at least, you can justify by saying she's supposed to be an absolute tank. But what exactly does she do for you on that front? Yeah, she can screen a single target NP, but remember she's nominally fighting a class where more often than not, enemies try to dumpster your entire frontline. Look, the things you'd want a Moon Cancer to do, Jinako doesn't do them terribly well. But at the end of the day, she gets a good night's sleep knowing she's the only game in town for new players for most of the year. You gotta pay her tribute since the others are limited 5 stars or welfares for an event that's not coming back. Oh wait. Next year we'll see the introduction of a mechanic called the Main Interlude. Certain events are compressed into a series of main story quests and, critically, give a copy of their respective welfare servants. No sign of Onigashima, tragically, but we get the next best thing, Seraph. That event gives BB, who does do all the things you'd want from a Moon Cancer. Like anal. That's what BB stands for, butt buddy. Admittedly, you do need rare prisms to NP5 her, but by then the game gets a lot more liberal about giving those out too. So in the end, Jinako wears a lot of hats. New players might find that useful, and she has grounds to retire in Gensokyo, but understands that her combination of roles isn't necessarily a niche that needed filling. Look elsewhere for your taunters, party chargers, and Moon Cancers. Your alternatives might not be able to do all 3 at the same time, but they're easier to get, and they'll do it a lot cheaper. As it stands, she's the worst Moon Cancer. She's playing a different game from the others, and I can't promise you it's a fun one. Sorry to break the bad news, but I hope you enjoyed this video. Like if you did, subscribe for more, and come watch me on Twitch where I stream every weekend, 3 PM Pacific time, Friday through Sunday. This week I'll be rolling for Nero Bride as part of my long-term project to complete the Pokédex, so keep an eye out for that. See you there.